and how that's done. Has that been good for FSU?
It wasn't just across the whole of the regions. For example, Cotterbull had a very different workforce model than Cairns, for example. So we split our workforce in half essentially, and we had Monday to Wednesday be one half of the team coming in to do work, and then Thursday to Saturday would be the other half doing the work, and that has continued right up until now. And the actual productivity increased, and I think it's fair to say a lot of the team enjoyed it because people had a bit more quality time off. They could actually take the kids to school, bring them home, and we swapped them around obviously, so it wasn't the same people doing Monday to Wednesday. But that's what we did here. They went to the 9-day weekend in Cairns, so we're doing longer hours during the day supporting production, but every 2 weeks obviously you essentially had your long weekend, and that again productivity wise has increased. The flexible work arrangements, a number of my planning team for example were working from home, some of the APS as well, and again productivity improved. So there's all different ways of working that individual to the specific needs, because what we've got to do at the end of the day, we've still got to support our customer, and our customer is obviously the ships and CASG. So the working that we did was in discussion with them. We didn't just go say this is what we're doing. We made sure we could support all projects and what was best for each individual customer, what was best to support them. And I think the proof's in the pudding really for the whole of Navy, with COVID. I think we, as an organisation, I think we've handled it really, really well. I would say across the entire workforce. I mean, we assisted with FTAs, we've assisted with PRCAs, we've assisted Sea Training Group where people haven't been able to travel. And I think there's a bit of a model there for the future, where that, I'm not saying it's going to be business as usual, but we're there to help and assist and, fill the gaps as and when.
Just got to say one more comment, really in support, Aaron. From out there in the forces and out there in the ships, the feedback we're getting is exceptional from FSU. So really, a big appreciation from all of us out there in the fleet. I think it's probably a little bit undersold, some of that sustainment offset cost, in that we have picked up so much in opportunity cost in what FSU's been able to get done for us now. So it's not just that sustainment, but there's engineering change, sustainment, some quality of life stuff that we otherwise would not have got going. So I think you can probably go far beyond that 45 million even again in the freeing up of the costs, especially with the tight budgets that we have at the moment and all that additional work that we've been able to achieve. So I think that alone shows that excellent utilisation of FSU. So I say, look, thank you, and we do constantly hear that positivity. And I think if you then look a little bit beyond that and see what we can do, and it may be offsetting or justifying for future that OLM cost as well, where we're seeing those at the level 10. It's been great. So look, from us, 3Z, well done. Thanks to everyone in FSU.
Yeah, thanks, Vance. Appreciate it. I mean, the cost. I've sent up a decision brief to H&E and HMS to allow us to get access to that portal data. H&E signed off on it. HMS has just come out with a couple of questions, which we've answered. If we get that portal data, we can then actually provide the fidelity in what we're doing and what we're achieving. And like you say, the 45 mil doesn't get given back to government. HMS uses it to do those additional things that she may not have been able to do. And the target for next year is 60 mil. It's an ambitious target, but we can't just sit still and say, oh, we'll do that every year. We need to keep pushing the boundaries. Certainly with the new capability coming on, I think there's options there for us to do more than we're already doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, sir. I was in FSU as a junior sailor years ago, and I can tell you now it is completely changed. So it's really great to see that it's striving to be contemporary. It includes the MH60, the Romeos, through 816 and 725 squadrons, as well as MRH90 or the Taipan through 808 squadron, the UAS squadron, which is 822X, as well as a MAF2 or the Aircraft Maintenance and Flight Trials Unit. And this is all supported by the Naval Aviation SPO. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Commander Tim Clerk.
Cheers, sirs, ma'ams, fellow engineers and technical sailors. I am Commander Timothy Clerk, the Fleet Aviation Engineering Officer. It seems fitting today that I sit here in front of a laptop rather than be there in person, as this is just representative of the world now under COVID-19. 2020 provided a year of challenges in the Fleet Air Arm, from support to op bushfire assist, generating high levels of fatigue in the workforce during a period of intended rest and recuperation, to COVID bringing challenges of managing social distancing within small maintenance teams, an overhaul of maintenance hygiene practices, and dealing with second and third order effects of distraction, fatigue, and changes in routine practices. Most significant within the Fleet Air Arm engineering community has been the full adoption of the Defence Aviation Safety Regulations, or DASARs. While DASARs were introduced in late 2016, we had been slow to fully explore and implement the flexibility and innovation this new airworthiness framework enables. As with most organisations, we have a large inertia to change and find comfort in what we know. However, 2020 saw 3 significant changes in the way we have enabled and empowered the AT and AE workforce in conducting maintenance and deliver aviation capability. Firstly, licensing. DASAR 66 military aircraft maintenance licences provide an important change in the utilisation of AT sailors. Licensing has brought us in line with our commercial aviation counterparts, allowing us to more efficiently utilise our limited workforce in the conduct of maintenance, as well as empower every individual in exercising their licence privileges. Benefits include workforce flexibility and adaptability, greater maintainer autonomy, and empowered accountability. This has provided a workforce multiplier where we have removed duplicate layers of supervision where there is no endangerment of flight safety, allowing the more experienced of our workforce to get back on tools. Secondly, maintenance requirements cards. During acquisition of the MH-60R Romeo aircraft, we took the US Navy's aircraft maintenance program and modified it to fit into our then technical airworthiness regulatory framework. We further included a number of Australian unique maintenance requirements and translated US Navy maintenance documentation and tools into Australian software medium. This introduced unnecessary complexity in maintenance documentation, introduced errors in maintenance policy, and diverged us from the lockstep approach with the US Navy. Enabled by the flexibility of DASARs, we've embarked on a realignment of maintenance policy and documentation. Most significantly in the approval of the US Navy's MH-60R maintenance requirements cards. While our maintenance policy was initially derived from these documents, we had introduced an order of magnitude increase in certification requirements, removed most of the interactive and supporting material, and continued to add more and more superfluous content. Approval to use MRCs has increased efficiency in the conduct and certification of maintenance, increased flexibility in the conduct of maintenance, and reduced management overheads. Feedback from the workforce has so far been extremely positive. Lastly, PBED. Following an increase in maintenance errors resulting from distraction, environmental factors, and operational tempo during bushfire assist, and coupled with the complex maintenance procedures, technical workforce hollowness, and perceived pressure, PBED, or Plan, Brief, Execute, Debrief, was introduced across all Fleet Air Arm squadrons and units to formally identify hazards and brief maintenance tasks prior to the commencement of any maintenance activity. Whilst not unique to the Fleet Air Arm, PBED, which has origins with the USAF and is widely utilised within the Royal Australian Air Force, has been tailored specifically for Fleet Air Arm operations and context. And while it is just a tool, it has been used as a central philosophy in the reinvigoration of the Fleet Air Arm maintenance culture. PBED is built upon the principles of Rule of Three and PAIR. Rule of Three provides a very simple way of applying an immediate risk management approach using a traffic light system, where maintenance must cease if a red or 3 ambers are identified which cannot be treated as SFAR. PAIR supports Rule of Three by helping identify potential concerns or hazards to the maintenance evolution. PAIR is an acronym for People, environment, actions, and resources, which provide broad guidance to the workforce to consider and identify possible hazards to the task at hand. PBED is conducted as a deliberate activity where it is documented on a pro forma and utilised in the task brief and debrief process. For simplistic tasks, PBED may be conducted as an immediate cognitive assessment, but must still apply the same process and rigour as the deliberate approach. The introduction of PBED has resulted in a reduction in maintenance-related errors and incidents, improved the effectiveness of task briefs, and introduced the concept of debriefs being a means of error capture within maintenance evolutions. And lastly, it has empowered the workforce to cease maintenance tasks where hazards cannot be treated as far either singly or in accumulation. Lastly, PBED provides a great tool to the QMS to identify and treat hazards across the entire workplace. So within the theme of enabled, these three initiatives have enabled the AT and AE workforce to be safer and be more efficient and effective in the conduct of maintenance and engineering in the delivery of aviation capability both ashore and at sea. With 2020 being a year of significant change in maintenance culture and process, 2021 affords us an opportunity to embed and mature these changes. As with any QMS, the Fleet Air Arm will continue to seek continuous improvement in our practices and will continue to focus on enabling our highly intelligent and motivated sailors and junior engineers.
Next is break for lunch. So lunch is, as you know, it's been supported and sponsored by Navy Canteens. Again, all the money which goes to Navy Canteens comes back to you guys. So I'd ask you to come back at 1300. We're going to come back early because we're trying to get NPCMA to come back on. We've had requests to see that presentation. So we'll try and get that going. If we can't get it going by 1300, we'll go on with the program. So we'll see you here in 1300. Thank you. welcome back to the second half. Through popular demand, we have MPCMA online. We're able to resolve technical issues. So without further ado, we've got Kai Wakefield on the line. Kai, over to you.
Thanks very much, Dad. Yeah, obviously popular demand. Everyone's hearing from MPCMA. So, all right, good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. This brief will focus on the relevant points and big issues that MPCMA engineering family are currently experiencing. So I'm Lieutenant Commander Kai Wakefield. I'm one of the career managers for engineers in MPCMA. Due to the classification of the brief, there are some specifics I won't go into. However, I'll endeavour to get the brief on the Fleet website so that full details can be displayed for those members that missed it or extra information that I haven't included. So this is our engineering, MPCMA engineering family structure. So we're 12 months into using this. It's a good overview of who is in the engineering family. It shows the centre of our existence as a strategic career management and careers training sections, those that are based out of Canberra. The outer ring for all those outstations around the country in the LCMCs. This new structure is headed up by Commander Tom Doherty as Deputy Director for Engineering, and the Warrant Officer Engineering Warrant Officer Alan Giles. And this allows for a one-stop shop for all engineering and technical personnel issues throughout the Navy. So I'll stick right into it to the ET workforce. So they're feeling the hurt across all ranks, but specifically at the leading sim and AV level. The complexity is increased by having 25 different streams across Navy, which is made up of the 4 specialisations and the number of different platforms that we have. We are working hard to minimise the hurt across the fleet when allocating future ETs. This is based off where we foresee the greatest efficiency in each specialisation and class after prioritising DDGs. So all application courses that aren't DDG related will draw sailors from the graduates of the mid-year initial trainings. We are working closely with TAN and ComTrain to minimise the gap between sailors completing initial training and starting their application courses. And finally, recruiting has also been increased. Something this won't show an immediate impact, but will help going forward. For the ATs, the biggest rank we are having issues with is AVs. In order to start to rectify this, we are posting to vacancies and not targets. This will obviously decrease the number of leaving seamen that are going through. However, it should stabilise the AV rank in the short to medium term. Previously, we had been promoting just to any targets that were given to us by Future Navy Workforce and not necessarily directly to vacancies. So we were oversubscribing at the leading seaman level. Some pertinent issues for the MTs, we are seeing good progression of trade journals, with approximately 200 completed this year, with a view to increase to 300 per year going forward. While we are getting good numbers through initial training, we need assistance from the fleet to get the remaining 600 odd sailors through their journals. The only way to do this is to get MTs on board. So we're looking to the MEOs out there to push the commands to utilise any extra bunks on board for MTs. Finally, as most of you will be aware, the promotion requirements for AVs to leading seamen have been updated. The only mandatory requirement is now the RAN trade maintainer qualification, so the completion of their Trade 3 journal. Cert 3 trade journal. However, ideally, they will also hold a minimum of an MST. This has changed from the previous requirement of only requiring an MST or another operational qualification. For engineering officers, our general principle is to push holes down. This means we aren't holding any vacancies at the captain and commander ranks. This in turn will create gaps at the lieutenant commander and lieutenant levels, of which we can't discuss the specifics today. These extra gaps at the lieutenant commander level have been further increased by the amount of promotions to commander that we have seen over the last 2 years, something we expect to reduce going forward. However, if you look at the overall numbers for engineers, we are oversubscribed in some ranks and PQs. In reality, this is not the case, and is mainly due to our workforce not being correctly captured. This is mainly due to engineers fulfilling out-of-category billets. Some of these positions do require engineers. However, the position has not yet been updated from being a PWO or MLO billet, for example. How are we looking to address this? So there are a few ways of doing this. The first is the reduction of out-of-branch postings that occur. These are rectified through firstly aligning our workforce through the update of the position PQ in PM keys by an AE733 to correctly be engineering, and for the crew managers to prioritise filling these engineering billets. This does not mean that you cannot achieve the breadth of experience required for promotion or professional development. There are several jobs within the engineering community that will achieve the same outcome. And of course, this change in posting priorities does not mean you cannot apply for selected postings. There are some selected postings which we specifically target as important roles for junior officers, namely divisional officers at Cerberus and Creswell, as these experiences are invaluable. Next, we are utilising the total workforce system to the best of our ability to fill gaps and recruit where possible. As an example, I have a number of commanders filling lieutenant commander positions on a ServOps C contract. So if you know anyone that wants work at any rank, send them our way, we definitely have jobs. Next, we're utilising the early consideration for promotion of lieutenants to decrease the gaps at the lieutenant commander level. This is done by decreasing the seniority requirement from 5.5 to 4.5 years. We also look at members who are likely to achieve their CQ in that promotion cycle, which is done by using promotion posting timeframes and how the member is tracking with their CQ. From this list, we then look at the top 10 to 15 personnel, their no-pass scores, promotion recommendations, and assessor comments to determine who is suitable to be assessed at the QBV early. This approach should not see a significant reduction in the amount of experience these members are gaining at the lieutenant level, as we are only taking those that are high performing. Finally, we are looking into retention in cooperation with the retention cell to identify ways to retain members, mainly non-financial, because as we all know, everyone's buckets of money are all dried up. The following is a quick fire round for some hot topics that are relevant or that we are seeing more recently. So we're seeing an increase in commands utilising NPCMA as remote or super DOs to fix their personnel issues on board and not take ownership themselves. Some examples that we have seen recently are to do with transfers of service categories or separations. Units not setting the expectations of the member prior to sending their paperwork on and guaranteeing an early release without considering the consequences to the unit and or the category. If there is a need for the member to separate earlier than 6 months, please engage with NPCMA as early as possible. We can make it happen for most cases, but the biggest sticking point is that command needs to support the release without relief of up to that 6-month period. This does not guarantee that you will get a replacement after the 6 months is up. It will just depend on the workforce needs and requirements. We are seeing an increased communication with regard to pay calls and compass. This is really good and should continue. Commands are getting in touch with us early to help both the unit and NPCMA come up with a plan and way ahead looking at the potential outcomes. Please keep this up. Unrestricted service is a big issue that we are dealing with. Members that aren't able to provide unrestricted service must submit their non-availability through their command to NPCMA. This allows Navy to adequately capture what our available workforce actually is. A quick note on IR and MAT, because it continues to come up as an issue. There are no excuses for not having your MAT completed. These are regularly reviewed for selected postings, promotions, and promotion boards, and is a direct reflection on the member's signature behaviours. For IR, there, however, are some excuses. However, these need to be formalised through a waiver so that you appear current and do not fall out of date. We understand that there are sometimes issues with IR, however, each command should be monitoring and fixing these issues. We are still seeing a few instances of members not submitting NOPAs or SPAs for a number of reasons. Although it is the member's responsibility to submit the performance report, supervisors still have an obligation to check if it has been completed. Either way, these reports are not optional for any member. This also includes reservists that serve for 20 days or more. And please do not copy and paste. It is very obvious when board members sit down and read through your last 3 NOPAs, and it's a direct reflection on this assessor or senior assessor. Finally, a note on likely to become suitable. This is still coming up. This is not based on, this is only based on performance and is not based on any qualifications that the member needs to attain. Please, if you have any questions about this, talk to us or talk to promotions. We'll be able to give you any up-to-date guidance. A quick note on member statements. If you want to advance your career, you need to submit a member statement. It doesn't matter if you're a junior officer or junior sailor, these are important to ensure that you are considered for both promotion and career advancement courses. Apparently there was also some confusion earlier this year. There is no physical attendance at promotion boards. This is just where senior members talk about you, not to you. Compulsory retirement age. This is being enforced across all ranks and PQs. If you are approaching CRA as a permanent Navy member and wish to continue, the best option is a ServOps C contract as a CERCAT 3 or 5 member. This change has come due to some members sitting in permanent positions way past CRA, which in turn holds up promotions and career progression for junior members. This is not as relevant in the engineering community, however, we all have to abide by the same rules. Interns is actually a better option for the member, as they have certainty of position and location for 12 to 24 months, and most importantly, can't be forced to go back to sea or on a director posting like those permanent members. Finally, I'm just going to finish up with a quick plug for a bunch of outplacements we have. We've obviously heard a couple earlier on in the day. For the officers, we have a few opportunities domestically as well as the US. If you do have more questions on these, please feel free to email myself or the selections team. So there's a few there for AT and MTs. Obviously, we heard from Penske earlier. There's a lot of Penske outplacements. These are all 12-month outplacements. And finally, some ET ones. So they are spread across the board. And FSU also has an internal outplacement system as well. Two final key points we want to highlight. Transparency and consistency are the two major principles we are using in our decision-making process. We are trying to improve our reputation. Due to the vacancies that we have, we are trying to share the herd across the organisation and post the vacancies as soon as we are able to. Please bear with us during this time. It is interesting, and we are trying to fill gaps where we can. Thanks very much. If anyone has any questions.
Question, sir. This is from Matthew Darrington. He's
Sydney.
Yeah, he's got a question from the Hobart Neo, who's the ex-EO for Lewin. Is there any plan to return to skilling billets on ships, posting personnel who are qualified but not experienced or class endorsed into substantive billets and impact ability to meet operational and maintenance requirements, particularly noting ongoing pressures for ships to manage training and respite for our sailors?
Short answer, I don't know. Long answer, please shoot me an email and I will be able to chase it down and see if there is anything planning in that space. It may be coming from between us and future Navy workforce. So,
controversially being eligible to submit a member statement. I spoke to a few people, some suggest submitting and some suggest don't. So obviously at our level, we haven't done a D drive, so we're not looking at promotions, we're not looking at staff course or anything like that. From FPCMA's point of view, is it still worthwhile us submitting those?
So my personal view and the view of promotions is member statements get overridden every year. So no one reads your previous member statements you submitted. I would like to think of it as a good opportunity for you to submit your member statement, even if you do it internally with your supervisor, just to get the idea and the habit of writing one and which way you want to write it. Any more questions from the room? I'll just check on GovTeams.
I guess also like at the MIA, it's a good chance to reflect on your skills and where you want to go as well. So not say, in terms of if it's work, you've got to do it. Like I said, but being able to think about what you want to do the next year or the next few years, to be able to say, how am I going to prepare myself for that job I want to go for a couple of years. So.
Any more questions from the outstations? Sydney?
I've got one.
Yeah, we've got one. Warren on St Milligan.
Yeah, Warren on St Milligan. So this is the statement about demands trying to get beds for training. There's sailors knocking on the door out there trying to get to sea. They've been told by NPCI they can't get to sea. I recently was up in Cairns, spoke to Melville, who said they wanted 3 AVs. I spoke to NPCMA, they said there's no one to send them. We've got hundreds of AVs wanting to go to sea. We removed the Q billets, which I don't think was a good idea. The thing we need to do is, there's the ability to train out there on a lot of ships, but some of these ships, like the LHDs or Chauls, they can take additional people, but they need to have a supervisor. They can't put it on the reliance on the ship because the ship has enough to do themselves. Is there any thought of that?
Most of that was broken up, I'm real sorry. I think you're asking about putting AVs onto ships.
Basically, there's ABs out there that want to go to sea. There's inconsistencies in what you're saying about getting people on ships. Q billets have been removed from the ships now, so they can't actually get extra people on there. And when you go to NPCMA, So Melville asked me about 3, they said they would take 3 extra sailors to train. I went to NPCMA, and NPCMA said they couldn't post anybody, there was no one there to post. But yet we've got hundreds of sailors wanting to go to sea. If you talk to around the fleet, go to FSUs, there are people that have not been to sea yet, they want to go to sea. So what we're saying is, open up the billets and commands to say, yes, I've got training positions there, but it's not actually happening. So is there anything being looked at?
Yeah, Roger. So I'll first say that we deal with people, we don't deal with positions. However, we are working closely with future Navy workforce because I know it's changed recently where we don't have any training billets on board anymore, which is the reason why we can't get the ABs on as quickly as possible. So hence why my earlier plug for MEOs to try and get as many MTs on board as possible using those extra training billets that aren't associated with MTs anymore. The issue you're pointing out is relevant, and we are trying to fix it. There's no short-term solution that we can find, but we are working with FNW to try and find an enduring solution.
Can I be involved in that conversation?
Yeah, no problems at all. Shoot me an email.
Thanks.
Regards to the physical location of the ship, has there been thought put to bulk posting some qualified technicians off of platforms and the dilution of the technical level all at once from these platforms, getting limited experienced technicians to replace them?
Yes. Short answer, yes. So this works the whole way down. So even last week when we did CCB and CSAC, which is selection of command and charge positions, we're even talking about the whole level. At the junior sailor level, it's up to the relevant CMs to manage that. And we are working closely with LCMCs to identify, try and split I suppose, keep the corporate knowledge on there as long as possible and split postings to enable that.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much, Kai, much appreciated. I'm glad we could sort those technical difficulties.
Thanks for your time.
So moving on, now we have a great opportunity to hear from the in-service FLIOs. So if I could ask the captains to come up. So Captain Hurst, Captain Hanley, we've got 10-15 minutes to talk about what's happening in their domains.
Okay, thanks, Caden. Ma'am, sir, all. Look, I think before we go into a bit of a question and answer type of session, Captain Hanley and I are just going to run through, recap, some of the events of this year that's kept our ships in service, busy and at sea, and has really affected a lot of our technical communities. First of all, I'll run through the classes of ship and surf for, and then pass across to MHP to do the same. The L-class vessels, the amphib vessels, LHDs, LSDs, big year. Involved in op bushfire assist from the start. Significant assistance with personnel to COVID assist, the regional presence deployment, and being ready and prepared at all times for humanitarian aid disaster relief. The DDGs have now adopted, we've now got 3 in service, the readying, reset model. Hobart's achieved great results this year as the online ready DDG, and I'll cover that a little bit more as we go forward. FFHs have continued to remain the backbone and front line of our surface force. They really are the little ships that can and have continued to achieve and provide those available units throughout this last 12 months. Finally, afloat support, AO. OP, MATV, significant force multipliers and a significant additional capability. We saw that, and we saw that exceptional assistance from Sycamore when it came to bushfire assist at the start of this year. And finally, the tanker, the sole provider, Sirius. We haven't forgotten you. The load has been excessively high for Sirius this year and achieved great results throughout. First of all, op bushfire assist. As I said, those L platforms, the capital ships, Choules and Adelaide being centrepieces at the start of the year through Malakuta and Eden. Canberra, the rapid reactivation out of a difficult maintenance period to provide a third and replacement vessel as that op bushfire assist was predicted to continue for our forces going forward. It was really that whole seaworthiness piece that we've been building to over the last 5 or 6 years coming alive and being put into action. processes and understanding to get our ships to sea have improved significantly. And I must say, what you've all contributed to that has allowed us to really understand what we have. It got us to a position where we exceeded the government's requirement. We didn't go into a position we fell into a number of years ago, and for an actual disaster relief, we didn't have the two. We had all 3 ships ready to go and ready to deploy. So a great effort from that amphibious community, really, in providing that. SMART itself, the program that sits in the background now for the Force, is helping us to be able to reduce some of that administrative backload when we get our ships through those sea release programs. We get it, the admin burden's high and our IT systems on board those ships are quite cumbersome. We're trying to do what we can, and there's a couple of programs in place, and you'll see some significant improvements in that over the next 6 to 12 months, which will help to take some of the load off our people out there at sea across both forces. COVID assist, as I said, up to 200 people in Surf 4 at a time. Off active seagoing vessels across the Force were put out there. Now that's over an MFU ships company. That came with a significant impost to our predictable respite and that maintenance loads. And yet again, BZ and thank you to FSU for their support there, and that, really, undefined cost there of what they were able to contribute to be able to help us drive that maintenance load down and keep those ships seaworthy and able to go. DDGs, FFHs, LHDs, whilst they shared alike in that personnel, new ship supply, preparing and getting ready to take a brand new platform, went above and beyond, taking the significant load of that whilst they're trying to train and get ready to bring that ship across in the new year. We thank you all for your continued support, your dedication whilst juggling the issues, especially on the home front. Those travel restrictions certainly significantly impacted, as did the RPD deployment on getting our people home. And we certainly have some plans next year to adjust those programs and look a little bit more at some hub and spoke style deployments that I think you're going to hear about a little bit more from Conflot this afternoon. The regional presence deployment, Canberra, Sirius, Hobart, Arunta, Stewart. The capital ship continued after coming through that bushfire assist, pushed out there, took the task group to sea, and now into a docking window. Great work and remain reliable all throughout the designated period. As I said, the readying DDG, Hobart. These are ships that aren't yet right there at full operating capability, but they went above and beyond and exceeded all of our expectations. 115 days alone, and I'm going to mention some of these sea days for some of these units, just for RPD. The Ready DDG online and achieved everything we needed. Now, HMAS Stewart. Now, if the Anzacs are the little ships that can, Stewart has been the little ship that can and did all throughout the year. Look, it's the longest MFU out of maintenance, right at the end of its usage and upkeep cycle. An outstanding performance from those engineering teams in keeping it out there safely and efficiently. And whilst the deployment ended in an unscheduled period of getting some rapid rectification of some of the key systems, the ship's back, ready to go. I will say Stewart achieved 170 days at sea. Arunta, fully operational AMCAP FFH, and I think appropriately rewarded for its significant contribution. A trying and difficult year, 180 plus days at sea. And finally, as I said, the forgotten kid, the fat kid, Sirius over in the west. We haven't forgotten about you. We have recognised now that over the last decade, you have achieved for the surface force, you are the MFU that has done more sea days and more operational days underway than any other ship. This year alone, 215 days for Sirius at sea and underway. So, overall, this has taken a bit of its toll. There is a bit of apprehension moving forward. We get it for the high risk weather season and the HADR online period for the ready response. There's a few adjustments that are going to help with that. The RSP, that reduced staffing period, versus a RAP to assist in the units being able to plan that, to allow us to get a little bit of that downtime and look after our people. Final little add before I add over to the MHP for their sort of stats and issues. Challenge and innovate. The Innovation Centre, touched on by Captain Melville before. We've got many examples of some rapid engineering change that have been deployed this year. I think there's about 15 coming directly from the ideas of junior sailors out there at sea that we've been able to get in there that have made life better on board the ship. Not just for driving our sustainment costs down, but also in making our quality of life that little bit better out there at sea for those units that have struggled to get a port visit and get alongside throughout those significant periods underway. So again, thank you FSU for your assistance with assistance with that in getting some of those initiatives done that CASG were already overstretched in order to achieve. The smart admin processes, if you've got any ideas, get them in. Now, while SMART is doing one thing to help drive down some of that burden when we're developing the ships and getting the ships through our sea release program, driving down, that admin load of producing your seaworthiness status reports, your first line of defence analysis and your cumulative risk assessments. If there's other things that you can see out there that are getting in the way, send me the proposals. Get them to Captain Hanley and I, propose the solutions. We want to do what we can to make those IT systems better and drive that administrative burden down. But overall, look, it's a massive year, unprecedented requirements, BZ all. Be proud of your achievements. You've certainly done yourselves proud, your Navy proud, and your country proud in Surface Force. Over to you, Handles.
Ben, thanks very much. And look, I could concur with everything that Ben said. I don't have quite the details about our platforms, but a BZ to everyone in the MHP4 that did their job. We brought people down from Cairns and we threw them down into the snowy mountains to support COVID-19. And we didn't lose a single sailor amongst those. But we had clearance diving teams, we had SMLs, people from mine hunters. We pulled people from everywhere to support COVID-19, and they cracked on and did it. Lots happening in the space. We're still bringing Armadales across to Cairns and doing 60 monthlies, but getting their crews back to Darwin so they don't lose the love of being at home. A lot of work happening in that space. Armadales continue to sit out there on the line and do their job 24/7, 365 days of the year. And well done to all those sailors and officers out there continuing to do that and support those government-directed operations. Lots progressing in the MHP world. We're still continuing with the Armadales, but looking to decommissioning those in due course and progressing the bringing OPVs into service, progressing a couple of projects in the remote and autonomous system. So the rapid environmental assessment, we've had that team from Mogwai out at sea this year, both down in Jervis Bay and up in Queensland, being deployed off Adelaide, and they're progressing, bringing their equipment into service. Still lots happening in the mine countermeasure space. Yeah, the projects have been going a long time, but we're actually starting to see equipment turning up, people actually using it, training it, and still a lot continuing to happen there. People still don't escape me. I still sit on sea release boards and I still see shortages of MTs and POs across the board. Don't forget to train your people, okay? If you don't train your relief, you will stay there longer, okay? So please continue that training, okay? But it has been a busy year right across the board. I've only been doing this one for a few short months, but I'm learning a lot more about the miners' world that I never knew existed. But there is a lot of stuff coming through the pipeline, especially down that remote and autonomous systems path. So if you want to get into that, then talk to your career managers, talk to your posters, get into that world, because it is only going to get bigger, and it's enough to prompt CN to put out a strategy about how we're going to manage and integrate those systems into the RAN. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, team. So the next presenter in our afternoon session is Commodore Dag, who, after 40 years of service, probably needs no introduction. But I'll just hit on a couple of points, if I might. Commodore Dag joined the RAN in 1980 and began his career as a sailor before commissioning in 1990 and going to RMIT, and a number of postings to so many ships by name that I probably won't go through. The highlights being
deployments into the Middle East and Timor. Most recent postings have been as the inaugural Director, Navy Technical Seaworthiness Assurance, and in that role in October 2014, assuming the responsibility of the design and implementation of what we now know as Defence Seaworthiness. Commodore Dagg was awarded a Conspicuous Service Cross in 2015 in the Queen's Birthday Honours for his outstanding dedication and devotion to duty as the Chief Staff Officer Engineering in Fleet Command. And he's currently Director General, Navy Engineering. Commodore Dagg, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. 40 plus years. So I don't have any notes. Did you get a pack of slides of anything? I'm not sure. Okay, I apologise for that. But really what it was is pretty much a collage of what you have been doing within Fleet, some of what they've been doing within projects and programs, and probably the dynamics around 2020. But seeing as though this will probably be my last engineering forum that I get to talk to, I get to do a background of 40 years. So don Andy Flash and be ready for it. That's not what I'm going to do. I do understand this is almost unofficial type level, so some of the things I was going to talk to you about, I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll touch over the top of them and very cautiously where I'm at. I will start with what Ben brought up, and that was COVID and bushfire assist. That was an enormous undertaking in a very, very short period. And I do know the SIMSACs were brought together over very short time, and the Admirals had to really get together and go, right, how are we going to approach that? They did their job, and then Fleet brought it to bear. The sea release framework and what was able to be achieved there is really, I suppose, paramount to what you guys here and throughout the Fleet and the supporting agencies, including industry, were able to achieve in a singular, important time for Australia. I was CSOE during Yasi, so I'm not going to go through the history of Yasi, you all know it. It was not a great time to be in Fleet. It was probably a very embarrassing time to be part of the Navy. We could not achieve what we needed to do. My family were hit by Yasi. They couldn't get out of their house, they had no power, the trees were down. So I had a little bit of a personal in here where we could not get our own ships up to support. Take 10 years and look at what was achievable through a practiced, logical program and process. And yep, things were pulled apart, ships sailed, but we knew exactly where we were, we knew exactly what we could do, and we had the support of not only our seniors, but also our juniors and all those parties that connected. And that does include FSU, industry, Fleet. And it wasn't just a can-do attitude, it was an absolute attitude, we're able to do this because we understand. And I think the change in 10 years is absolutely that. And that's what you're doing now. That's what you do on a daily basis. This morning I was down at Canberra, lucky enough to look at the change in the pods, 4 props versus 3. I won't go through more detail than that, but aspects of just that was we are able to achieve things because we now have a process and a buy-in from top to bottom and on the broader sides. And that's important because that's what we as a Navy and as engineers need to go forward with. Because without all those connecting pieces, we'll be back in fighting, unable to achieve those outcomes that we must achieve for both government and the Chief of Navy. So how do we do that going forward? Where are we at right now starts to develop the picture for the future. And that's even our documentation. So I'm not going to go through all the N4 documents and the AMP. I know you'll be riveted to hear about where we're at. But substantially, come the end of this month, the ABRs will be gone and you'll be working with the AMP process. That's been an absolute challenge over the last 3.5 years. Why? We shifted something like 16,000 plus documents into a singular library that Navy is able to manage and own. So, and the reflection of that is right at the top policy from the Chief of Navy now, right down to your SOPs on board the ship. They're all now connected. Part of the system for the defence seaworthiness was about that. How do we know that we're achieving what the regulator says? These are our highest risks, whether they be management and governance and business pieces, or right down to our structural and our standards and our normal technical regulations that we understand. We now have a library system that supports that. Where will we go in the future? Having more understanding of that. So no longer will you need your handy billies in your back pocket, and I've still got mine from when I was an able seaman, and I've got just about NSNs that I suppose not worth too much anymore. I do have the NSN for a wing of a Seahawk if you want one. Part of that. I've also got the NSN, I think it was for the canopy of the A4s, so if you want one of those, I've got the NSN for it. But what the library does that allow you to do going forward is you can track everything. If you want to search something now, you've got the ability to do so. The importance of that is it is all connected, and it's not just somebody's, oh hang on, I think this or I think that. The front row would be able to quote 5225 and 5230. Guess what? They don't need to anymore, and you in the back there don't need to. And you shouldn't need to. It should be available to everybody to understand why we've got those processes and procedures. Now, the more important piece of that is you in the back have the absolute input to now say, well, hang on, this does not make sense, and you send that through, it gets changed. And I know that works because we've been doing it. And it doesn't change, it doesn't take years to change it or update it. It takes days, and sometimes we can change it within hours if it's that significant. Right. So that's the growth going forward. So I hope Commodore Durbin is ready to take for the next step for the N4 library on that. Oh, I'm going to move. Sorry. Am I out of vision, am I? Right, got it. Got my director at the back there telling me where I have to stand. So the N4 library will continue and continue to progress going forward. One question that does get to me a lot is around meeting the requirements of the regulatory system. You've all heard about the governance management compliance obligations, the GAMCOs, the activity condition compliance obligations, the ACOs. Where are we at with those? Just a quick one. The GAMCOs are being put together now with the means of compliance to the regulator on behalf of CN, and that's being led by Rear Admiral Richards at the moment before she takes over as H&E. I guess because of my background, not just because I'm DG Eng, I got slotted to do the activity condition-based compliance obligations for Navy, setting the means of compliance for that, and as well as our engineering compliance. I found it really interesting. DCN didn't quite say that when I was briefing him up on what the means of compliance and how we were going to structure it. I think I got a bit excited when I said, well, this is how we're going to meet it and this is the level and going forward. But what the structure allows is for you out there to forget about ACOs in essence. Because if you follow the processes, follow your SOPs, follow your program, follow the N4, you in fact will meet the requirements of the ACO. Because I've put it at the level of the 1 stars and the 06s to meet that compliance. So it's their responsibility and their accountability to the Chief of Navy to make sure that the policies that drive down meet the regulatory requirement. So one of the big things from industry as well is they go, well, how are we going to meet this? Do what Navy says. If you follow what Navy's requirements are or tell us how you can do it. So don't solutionise for them, give them the solution, or they can solutionise to you in meeting it. Then, as long as it complies with what Navy requires, we will meet the regulatory requirement. And that's been a big step, because there have been a lot of people say, oh, hang on, I have to answer the regulator. If you look at the aviation world, they have a structure of the chiefs signing off on paperwork. Why? Because they're accountable for doing that, and it follows their regulatory process. They don't care what regulation that they're meeting, they just need to do that and know that they have to do that. Delegations and accountability are absolutely important in this process. So if you're sitting in any seat or have any bunk on that ship, you have an accountability to do your job, do your role as that engineering person, as that technician, because you are part of the regulatory process to meet our requirement for the regulator. So when we talk about gaps, when we talk about people not doing their MSCs, MSTs, unable to do their Cert 3s, we're in fact not meeting our own requirements to meet the regulatory requirements. So that is why it's so important to train people, qualify people, because you are then meeting our higher and CN's regulatory requirements that he has to meet CDF's outcomes. What else? It's been an amazing year, I guess. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Norway. I'd never been to Norway. And I was going to try and take, at that time, Captain Durbin. I'm sure she would have been excited to go to Norway. But I suppose doing virtual has enabled us to do a whole bunch of things. And Captain Hertz is now learning that to do meetings with the US, you have to be up at 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning. So Ben, thank you very much for stepping in and doing a couple of those tasks. Some of those are the international working groups around how we as navies can work in a COVID environment. So at my level, I was part of a working group with about 16 countries. And we hook up, started off by phone. They ended up very long conversations. And now we kind of use a bit of GovTeams, a bit of phones and all that. But I think there's now about 21 countries. What was the last count, Ben, that you had? About 20, 21 countries, I think, involved?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, pretty close. And very open discussion and conversations around how do we meet this challenge of COVID? How do we build those COVID bubbles so our ships can sail and operate and meet our operational requirements? Been quite a challenge across the world. I do want to thank Fleet. I do want to thank every single sailor and officer that sailed and didn't do too many port visits. You weren't the only navies doing it. Canada was very similar, and there was a couple of others that once they had that bubble, they maintained that bubble. The US went even further. They had 2 crews operating ships at times. One crew would prepare the vessel, the other crew would be in isolation. Once the vessel was ready to sail, that crew would go off, the ship's cleaned, the other crew came on board and they sailed that day, not to return for 6 to 9 months, and in fact a couple of others are a lot longer than that. But that's how they were operating. Some really interesting things have been looked at for looking after compartments and that, not just cleaning gear, but using UV, starting to look at sonics, but I think the sonics was flicked pretty quickly. But it was that innovation piece. How can we ensure that the surfaces of not just our ships internally, but everything that comes in, our supplies, how can we ensure that we don't have contamination coming forward? So there's been some really innovative ideas. And the fantastic thing about it is it's been shared across the world. This has not been held to one navy or, hang on, guess what, we know something you don't know. That has not been the case whatever. In fact, we're even part of a working group that has a site that we can go into, we can put our pieces in and extract those out. Obviously, from an operational and an area where we need to have a level of security around it, we're very mindful of that. But when we're looking at people's safety and how we look after our sailors and officers out there, there was pretty much free for all. Again, the bushfire assist, I think Ben touched on it very, very well. it was a case in point. We were able to achieve something that I think even raised the eyebrows of our very senior officers of what we were able to achieve. And certainly commentary at that level was, wow, we can do it. So I thank all the team for that. What else is happening this year? Look, the challenges around budget, I won't go, they continue. We've got a massive program. The major projects you know about. There's probably about 30 to 40 other minor projects and programs that certainly my team in Canberra and others are associated with. And that's some high-end stuff and right down to looking at some other details going forward. We have challenges in that because the rapid technology changes, the agility and flexibility that we must have as an operating Navy needs to be put further and put forward to a challenge for us. How do we deal with a very agile, flexible Navy with the threats that we deal with on a daily basis? How do we deal with that? We all have our old configuration processes and programs and that, and they're there for a reason. How do we maintain that but build our flexibility and agility? We need to do something there. We need to move forward. I often get asked about additive manufacturing. I've got the N4 document on my desk. I just asked them to flick it to Commodore Durban. But that'll get out for further review. People are asking me, why can't I get that out really quick? Why can't we print this and print that? It's not that easy. Restrictions on what the type of materials we have on board, we have a reason behind that. If you just open it for any 3D printer with the parent material and not understanding the chemical makeup of that parent material, we could put a hazardous material on board our ships that could impact our sailors or our operational availability. So we've got to be careful of how we approach it. But that doesn't mean that we can't do it, doesn't mean we stop doing it. The US in their submarine program, the nuclear submarine program, do use it, but they are very restrictive in where they do it. Our supply chain, they do it, but there is processes and procedures around that. So our N4 document provides support to what we can do, where we can do it, and then how do we train our people? So I still need people qualified and trained. Yep, I know most of you, or a lot of you will have your home 3D printer and you've been probably inappropriately doing the Lego block that you missed and the kids have lost and you're, oh hang on, I need one of those reprinted. You're not supposed to do that. Or anything else. So we need them trained, we need them qualified, and what about the machines? I don't want just any 3D printer on board. We need to understand what the level of that printer does and the capability of the printer. So, but again, all these could be roadblocks, but they shouldn't be. They just write over little hurdles. Let's get over through them, so that we and I believe that go over or go through it. You know, either is an option. And sometimes we have to break things to. All right, well, that's just a barrier put up by somebody. Learn whether it is a real barrier or not going forward. So they're the conversations that need to be had. So I do hope to have that out by the end of the year. If not, I might leave it for a month or two and allow Commodore Durban to finish that off. The reason being it impacts CASG, it impacts industry as well as the supply chain, and impacts the requirements for trainees, trained personnel, and getting the printers on board. I do know ships have got printers on board and we are doing some minor printing, but that's only at the lower level. So that's one that keeps on throwing up, but the innovation piece, we need to continue to do that, as I said, for that agility and flexibility. I will point out Aaron and Captain Laxton. What they have done at FSU over the last couple of years has been phenomenal. When I was CSOE, FSU came under me and we had something like 13 or 1400 people within FSU at the time, and we just could not do our role as FSU. So what they've been able to do and what they've been able to achieve now, and having a real structured program, a business program that delivers and supports the fleet as it should, and looking after our sailors and officers as we go through, has just been phenomenal. So thank you, Aaron, and I do thank Greg, and I thanked Greg before I went. I'm not going to talk too much about the FLEOs, they've had their turn, but again, the structure of the class lifecycle engineering, the fleet, the force lifecycle engineers and the future force lifecycle engineers, what they've been able to do and bring together that second line of defence through the first line has been exceptional, and it's great to see the changes that have come over those last couple of years. The second and third line, look, there's still a lot more work to go on with that second line and bringing and drawing the information up. Captain Shindy and her team, Rod Norsworthy and so forth, have done a great and phenomenal job in being able to bring the NAMs together. There's still a lot more work to do that, and it needs to be connected closer to the SMART and that first line of defence from a fleet perspective. We've got a bit more work to do with the futures and the projects and the programs, but that is starting to connect as well. I won't go through the change for the Naval Engineering branch, but I went over the last 10 months, I've done a significant change in there, especially with what used to be called the Naval Technical branch and what that delivers. I don't have time to do that today, but I have been getting around to certainly the 2 stars, 1 stars, and briefing them on those changes. They are there and influence both the fleet piece and the projects going forward. So look, I've been wound up a little bit, so I just wanted to give that round piece. I know H&E's going to talk pretty soon, and he's online ready to go almost. So, sorry? We've got a few minutes. Oh, okay, so I guess that's what I prefer anyway, the questions. There is more I could say, but then I would get into more detail and I'd be overshooting my time. So, yeah, I'm open for questions. No hard ones, otherwise I'll ask the front to answer them.
So I know
Except
during
for
your
those
job, it goes very, very quickly.
Sorry? What?
When you're in your job, 2 years goes really quickly, 2 years, but now, what things would you like to finish off? What's your priority to finish before you actually leave?
I suppose it's not so much finish. What I would like to do, and I aim to do, is to make sure that they're in a position where Rachel can, Commodore Durbin can take over and go, right, now it's my turn to move this forward. One thing it's really hard to do in any of these jobs, and yourselves would be included, is if there's something half done and you're not quite sure what the person who was doing it was thinking, right? I think Commodore Durbin and I are pretty well aligned with most things, but there'll be other things that I've gone, oh, hang on, that's been, say, my piece that I've been concentrating on. So there are a couple of ones, I'm not going to mention them today, but there are a couple of projects and programs there that I've been working on behalf of CN, and I will probably support, if required, to continue that, with DG Eng being the implementer and the absolute driver into the Navy. So I guess the completion is the N4 work to put it together. Certainly Rear Admiral Richards started that journey and drove what it needed to look like. The next step was do it. And through Captain Walter, Captain Bailey, the whole team across there have been able to drive and push that. And it's been a hard ask. It's been tough because that is every single document, including all the SPOs aligning in those documents as well. So getting that ready. There is an aspect that we still need to look at, that connectivity of ACOs and where does class fit in, where does all those standards fit in and all that type of stuff. So I've been doing a fair bit of work on that, but I'm not going to go into that detail today. But that's what I think. So, and it's really just, is it in a shape? Have I moved it forward in that 3-year period to be able to, put Navy engineering on a continuous role? I think we've achieved that. I think fleets have achieved that. It's the next, what's next? What is that next piece? The projects and programs, they're huge, and they're gaining momentum. Tomorrow they'll cut steel for the Type 26 prototyping down at in Adelaide. So you think Hunter and C5000 is too far off. Well, they're starting to now prototype and ensure that the program and the processes are ready to go. The tooling's right, the people are trained and they're qualified. And they've got a couple of years then to make sure that is driven home. So there's a fair bit in that space going forward. Attack, OPVs, are all, the AORs, all that type of stuff still pushing forward, going forward. There's still a bit of work to be doing with the transition from acquisition. Admiral Malcolm and her maritime acquisition and sustainment area and looking at all that driving forward. There's more work for us to do in being able to support that going forward, and that's something that Commodore Durbin will take going forward. So I guess I didn't really answer your question other than it's, all right, is it in a place and a position for Commodore Durbin to come in, take it and run for next, And then with all the other bits that, keep coming from the edges, because there's always that. No more questions? All right. This will be my last chance. So look, I want to thank engineering from across the board. It's my opportunity and I'm going to steal this and I don't care. A 40-year plus career from a sailor up through to here, I had no idea. So my point to anybody out there, any sailor, any officer, and yes, I can say that because I'm in this position, but you just never know where your career is going to be. But if you're true to yourself, you're true to Navy, then there is absolutely no limit to what you can achieve. And it doesn't matter whether you get out as a naval seaman, a leading seaman, a chief, warrant officer, commander, 2.5, or a 1-star or a 2-star or whatever. If you've been true to yourself and true to what you want to achieve in the Navy, then you absolutely have had a successful career. And I believe I've had a successful career, and I've enjoyed probably 90% of it, and there's 10% that I could probably forget about tomorrow. But from the people, from the Navy, from the activities that I've done and all those stories that you have when you're sitting around a dinner table, and some of the ones you're not allowed to tell around the dinner table, they are what the Navy's life is about. And yes, everybody says, I'm going to miss the people. I will miss the people, but I'll miss being part of what the people bring. And that's the main thing, because the people will still be there. I still have friends who have got out and we're still connected, and I'll still stay connected to those who want me to stay connected to in uniform. But be true to yourself, be true to the Navy. And if you ever find yourself struggling, talk to somebody. And if you ever find yourself that, this is not for me, then have that discussion. And if it's not, move. But if it is, put your heart and soul into it. So I wish you all the best going forward, and I absolutely wish Rachel all the best. I think she'll do a fantastic job. I think it's a great selection, and I encourage you all to support her going forward. So, cheers.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm just going to introduce you briefly, but just like Commodore Dagg, I don't think you really need one. But I tripped across a couple of facts out of your bio. The inaugural class at ADFA in 1986. A number of postings within the Fleet Air Arm, as you know, as an aeronautical engineer, and through to culminating in the Navy Aviation SPO Director position, where he was appointed a member of the Military Division of the Order of Australia in 2012. Following promotion to Commodore, he was appointed as Director General Navy Aviation Systems in DMO, and has spent the last 4 years as our Head of Navy Engineering. The floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Matt. I just
caught the tail end of DG Engine's presentation there. I don't particularly want to repeat some of the things he said, but this is the last time I'll engage with you as a fleet engineering forum, and I just have to. I would just like to let you know how a privilege to be H&E. You heard that I was part of the inaugural intake into ADFA. I actually joined the Navy as a WEO, there's no way in the world I could have ever predicted that I would be here today in Cairns addressing you as H&E in my last couple of months in the job. So it's been a real privilege. I think, I always reflect on some of the key things that have shaped me as a person, and there's no doubt in my mind. Back in about 2003, 4. I think like all of us in this room do, we have opportunities that are thrown what we deeply consider, and they might be alternatives to a Navy career, and I'd certainly done that. But then, there was a particular job I wanted to do, and that was the chief engineer or the PE equivalent within the Naval Aviation SPO. And then, 3 months after having taken up that job, we had the Sea King accident on Neas Island, and I think if there's any aviators in this conversation, you'll know that event has shaped me. It's shaped the fleet arm as we know it today. I still draw on a lot of the things I learned from that in how I do, how I act as H&E. For those of you that work with me, you know that I'm to the point, occasionally blunt, but that's just the way it is. And I really think that we're in a really good place going forward. When I reflect on where we were, I'll start off with, hopefully a number of you might have seen the seaworthiness video we put together earlier this year. If you haven't, I can send you the link. Certainly, as the Navy responded earlier this year to the Bushfire Assist Program, when the bushfires were burning down at Malakuta and Eden, and you saw Sycamore and Jules and Adelaide sail down there at very short notice. I reflected on only 10 years ago in 2011, when certainly the more senior people in this room will remember that the Cyclone Yasi rolled through North Queensland and the Navy was unable to respond. That was a pretty dark moment for us as a Navy. It was difficult to hear the Minister of the Defence at the time, Mr. Smith, talking about the Navy in the way that he did. That was tough. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that it was only 10 years ago. So, 10 years in terms of cultural change is not that long. And we have done a remarkable job to rebuild our Navy into one that now has a credible, seaworthy capability that can respond where it's called upon. And that's a credit to everybody who's in this room, in this conversation, and anyone who's been part of that. And certainly Col Dagg deserves a lot of credit for his work as the project director for the Seaworthiness Management System and the work that he's done in the last 4 years at DGN. So, Col, I think I can see you there. Well done, mate. And I thank you for all the... to this forum. Well, a lot of the questions I was getting was people just didn't understand where we were going as an organisational entity, and it's a pretty broad remit to think this thing we call Navy engineering. I'm always surprised where I find people working in the sorts of things that they're doing. It's incredible, from some of the systems they're maintaining on our ships. Our engineers are working on in terms of the future projects to some of the submarine systems that we're considering. Appoint engineers throughout the whole Navy to do that. And Kath Richards and then Cole have completely reformed the way we devolve engineering authority throughout the Navy. This notion of principal engineers, this notion of warrant holders, so principal engineers looking after our organisations, warrant holders providing expertise throughout, across a broad range of activities. And the last thing, putting in place material governance over that whole system so that all of that is actually complied with. That has been a fundamental reform in the last 4 years, and I think we're in a really, really good place now. Our engineering policy, you'll hear it to refer to as the N4 library. It's coming together. The difficult bit is going to be the class level, but sit right down the bottom. I'm expecting to see a flurry of activity at the end of this year, and then we should be right. And the N4 library now is structured where from our doctrine at the top, right, our policy and procedures to it. Most of the people sitting front row of this conversation know what there's no structure to it. You really had to understand how the books all mesh together to actually use them. And that's what we asked people to learn. They don't need to have on that. The way we've organised ourselves, I think one of the things I heard 4 years ago was, where is this thing called an AMSTO? It stands for. I think we've come right through that. I think now the AMSTOs are clearly understood. The only engineering, maintenance, and support are tightly linked together. Act independently, they must act together. And that's their operating model. Back to what it was in 2011. I mean, it's a challenge. That's something. You still hear me? Yeah, okay, we can. So that's a challenge. We can never let that out. That to happen again. So that's the challenge I throw down to all the young people in this room. Is that Owen's worthy. We now have we good?
So we've got a little bit of a network issue here. We're just going to pause for a second. If you can just cut your video, that might help us out a little bit.
Right. It's pretty grainy, isn't it?
Turn the camera off. Can you still hear us there, sir?
No. I can hear you. Yeah. I can just go on audio if you like.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Sounds better.
Try that. You should be able to get better audio through that.
We might hear that?
Yeah. Yep, go ahead, sir.
Right, okay. So I was just saying then, those hard-earned achievements that we've had over the last 10 years, so that we understand the seaworthiness of our platforms, we understand how to keep them seaworthy, how to risk manage the seaworthiness aspects of our platforms. We can never allow those hard-earned achievements to lapse. We can never go back to where we were in 2011 because it's all the young people in this room is that we must continue to go forward. The future, the challenge ahead of us is just too great for us to ever lose sight of how we keep these complex systems that we operate on our ships seaworthy. So we did a bit of work earlier this year in terms of what the next strategy might look like. Where might we take the engineering into the next 5-10 years? And the key themes that came out of that, and some of you in this room were part of it, was our people. Our people remain our number one priority. Will not deliver what it promises. But what that means for us is we're going to have to find something else. Our current systems will not serve us forever. Team Centre, Millers, AMPS, those sort of systems will not serve us forever. They're not really fit for purpose. We must continue to evolve our systems so that we be a smart Navy. Technology and innovation. Now, I've been talking, there's two types of technology we deal with in this Navy. There's new technology, that is. There's emerging technology, which is obviously your slow burn stuff. The stuff we work with DSTG to develop takes a long time to develop, and it takes a long time to introduce into service. But I think what we're seeing now is this emergence of this thing called disruptive technology. Stuff that hits us quickly, and we need to get it into service quickly. I don't think any of us should underestimate how big a challenge these future shipbuilding programs are. Building offshore patrol vessels, future frigates, future submarines in this country in a continuous drumbeat for the next 30 years. That's a continuous program of work that none of us have ever experienced, and one that is going to challenge us as a relatively small, incredible example of technical mastery that we expect of all of our embarked technicians and engineers. Now,